that I'm going to preach this sermon series, or at least one like it, every year that I'm in ministry. Because as you can see from our slide here, we're going to be learning about United Methodist people. We're going to be learning about United Methodist Christianity, and what we believe, and how we believe that, and how we arrive at what we believe. That's sort of what we're going to be about today. You see, about 25 years ago, probably not even that, if you were Methodist, and you moved, or got fed up with the preacher, or whatever it might be, and you wanted to change churches, you went from one United Methodist church to another United Methodist church. Because after all, you're Methodist, right? If you were a Baptist, you go to a Baptist church. If you're Anabaptist, you go to an Anabaptist church. And that's the same with Presbyterians and Universalists and the Lutherans as well. But that's not the case anymore. What has become a bit more important in Christendom and the various denominations is not the actual existence of the denomination, but in fact, its location, the church's location. Whether the preacher's any good, whether the people in the church are warm and welcoming, and then comes denominational sort of loyalty. So that sounds like you. If you come to this church because it's not far from your house, which is okay with you. Or if you come to this church because you like the preacher, that's especially okay with you. Oh, come on. Or if you come to this church because you like the people, and you're not exactly sure what it means to be United Methodist, then this sermon series is for you. Just by the way, all of that change, that we're not Methodist Christians, we're just Christians. That's not bad. It's just different. So if this sounds like you, then I'm preaching right to you. So we're going to be doing this through the month of October. It's 5 Sundays long. So today we're going to be talking about the book of discipline and sort of the general hierarchy of the church, the rules, like I was telling kiddos. Next week we're going to talk about grace. Then we'll start the countdown. Wesleyan quadrilateral. Talk about 4 different aspects of Wesleyan faith. Then we're going to talk about the 3 general rules of the church. And then we're going to talk about the 2 sacraments. That'll get us all the way through October. And just so you know, the next Sunday after that will be the first Sunday in November, which is All Saints Sunday and Stewardship Sunday. So we've got quite a bit of ground to cover the next month. Today, we're going to be talking about how we arrive at what we believe. We're not really going to be looking at what we believe. We're just going to be looking at how we get there, the process, the people who govern us. And today, and we'll get to what we believe in subsequent sermons later on. But today is more about how. But before we get to actual governance, to actual committees and rules and conferences and all that fun stuff, I want to ask a question. Why do we bother with governance at all? I mean, if we didn't, then we'd just be Baptists, right? No? I'm kidding, of course. But the reason that we bother with governance is not because it makes sense, although it does. And we don't do it because it's convenient, although it is. We bother with the governance, we bother with committees because, believe it or not, committees being led by laity is biblical. And for that biblical foundation, we turn right to where we just read, Acts chapter 6. It's a really interesting time in the life of the church. As I said, this is sort of the infancy of the church. This is how they got going. They made new rules and tried new things. This was also a time when the church was spreading like mad, like wildfire. Thousands of people being baptized each and every day. The apostles not knowing what the next day might bring. And unlike today, again, it's not bad, it's just different. Unlike today, when you joined the church, when you became a part of the Christian way, the follower of Christ, everything about you changed, including your place of residence. You would literally pack up all that you had and move to what amounted to a commune. You would live together, and you would share and distribute equally. Everybody did. You were part of the way. You participated in this almost utopian society. And you know what? It worked. There's a few sort of, I wouldn't even say humorous, but one sort of outstanding example of a person or a couple not sharing equally with what they had. Does anybody know the story of Ananias and Sapphira? Some of you do? Ananias and Sapphira were followers of the way, but they sort of hedged their bets. They didn't exactly give all that they had. Maybe they gave 90%. It doesn't say, but they gave a lot, just not all of it. And the leader of their church came to Ananias and said, I think that you might not be sharing fully with the community. And you know what happened to Ananias? Drop dead. Same thing happened to Sapphira. It's a very interesting story. So for the most part, people shared fully with the church. There was no hunger. There was no thirst. Until there was. See, the society of the church began to sort of backslide. Because all the old divisions that used to be there, the gender divisions, the class divisions, the cultural divisions, began to kind of seep their way back into the church. And people began to argue along gender lines and racial lines and cultural lines. Does that sound familiar at all? And for one reason or another, the Hellenist heathens, that is the Greek widows, began to kind of get the short end of the stick. And they complained. Because it seemed that the Hebrew widows were getting far more. So they complained to a series of people, and it sort of it caught on, and people were upset about it. So they came to the apostles, the people who were with Jesus, by the way, the ones who ministered alongside him, slept and ate with him, the people who knew Jesus. They came to him and said, "Hey, disciple guys, hey, apostle people, we've got this problem. It seems as though the food is not being shared equally. What do we do about it?" And in an almost holier-than-thou response, at least in my brain anyway, the apostles, the disciples, look at the people and go, "Are you kidding me? That's what you're spending your time worrying about? We see that it's important to you, but frankly, it's not important to us. What's important to us is that we continue to spread the faith. So since it is important to you, form a committee." And there have been committees in the church ever since. We say it's important enough for the apostles to choose committees, so therefore it must be important for us to choose our leaders. Now, you and I both know that over the course of time, it's gotten a great deal more complicated than just one committee of 8 men, no less, leading the church. And so we've begun to make more committees, and more committees, and more committees, and more committees. And I'll tell you that we don't have to. Does anyone know the 4 committees that are required by our book of law, which we'll talk about in just a second? What are the only 4 committees required by the book of discipline to run a local United Methodist congregation? Nominations, finance, SPR, church council. It's actually just 5, because I can serve and say trustees. That's all that's needed. But of course, we find ways to be more useful. We form a worship committee, or we form an evangelism committee. About a year ago, in fact, we formed an ad hoc committee, again, not required, but allowed by the book of discipline. We formed an ad hoc committee called the Day School Task Force. Their entire reason for being was to explore whether it was feasible, whether it was worth it, whether we could afford to build a daycare on our campus, one of our buildings. And of course, they arrived at the answer, yes. But we don't have to have these committees. We have to have just those committees. But occasionally, like I said, need arises and we meet. We meet these committees because there's something that the church feels is important. And we want to make sure that that event or that area gets the right or the proper amount of focus in the church. So we form committees. Sometimes a lot of committees, sometimes not. So all of these committees, this is kind of getting into the how we arrive at what we believe. Once a year, all of these committees, mainly the committee heads, they gather together, and a huge number of at-large members also gather to do it once a year, and they form the governing body of the church. Anybody know what it is? Heard somebody whisper back there. Charge conference. By the way, our charge conference is on November 7th at 7. Right in here. I want you guys to be here, okay? So once a year, we gather as the charge conference, and the charge conference can do anything it votes to do. It can vote to take on debt. It can vote to approve raises. It approves budgets, or unapprove, disapproves budgets. Sends it back to committee, as it were. The committee, the charge conference, is the governing structure. And by the way, the conference is the base system of the entire United Methodist Church. Any organization, or governmental governing organization brought together is known as a conference of some kind. So ours, the local church, is the charge conference. The local church is often called a charge. So it's a charge conference. And just like a charge conference, so first let's get here. A collection of charge conferences, a regional collection of charge conferences. Anybody know what that is? Oh, by the way, I want to show a map. Pull up this map, first map. That's our annual conference, by the way. So a collection of charged conferences is called an annual conference. Any idea how often an annual conference meets? Right? Not a very creative name. But this is our annual conference, and you can actually see the different districts within the annual conference. So I spent a lot of time in the North District. That's where Texarkana is. I went to high school there. We are in the Central South. See that little circle there? Little CS, Central South District. That's our conference. So a collection of charged conferences is called the annual conference. This is called the Texas Annual Conference. Texas Annual Conference is one of the oldest, one of the largest, and one of the most, frankly, influential because of its size in the entire nation. So you were part of making it become, it's called the Texas. And now the rest of the Texas, there's the North Texas Conference, South Texas Conference, there's the Great Plains is another jurisdiction, but there's 4 or 5 different conferences that as Methodism grew in the state of Texas, at first it was just the entire state of Texas, the Texas Annual Conference. Then more and more people began, so they subdivided the Northwest Texas Conference and the Texas Conference. And they subdivided again and became the Southwest and the Northwest and the Texas Conference. So that's why it kind of began to lead, but we were the first one, the Texas Annual Conference. And just like a charge conference, remember that's the governing body of the local church. Just like a charge conference is governed or ruled by a local pastor called the superintendent, so too is the annual conference led by a pastor. But not just any pastor. Led by a what? You guys like? A bishop. That's right. And by the way, I think this is the next picture here. That's our bishop. Bishop Scott Jones. Scott Jones has been our bishop for like 2 months and 2 days. We just got our new bishop. We saw off a fantastic, wonderful leader named Bishop Janice Riggle Huey. She was with us for 12 years. And we welcome Bishop Scott Jones. So he's the one who leads our annual conference. So that's Bishop Jones. So like a collection, and you can go just to the sermon slide now. Like a collection of charge conferences is called an annual conference. A collection of annual conferences is called annual. We have general, that's a very common answer. There's one more level between annual conference and general conference. Jurisdictional conference. You can show that map. This is our jurisdiction. So if a bishop is elected by a jurisdictional conference, they will serve somewhere in that geographic region. And by the way, you can see the different districts within conferences in Texas, right? So jurisdictional conference, unlike annual conference and unlike charge conference, meets every 4 years. And their primary reason for existing, well, not their sole, but their primary reason for existing is to elect and appoint bishops, whose terms also last 4 years. So jurisdictional conference meets every 4 years. So as a bishop retires, then they elect him every 4 years. We just elected 3 new bishops at our most recent jurisdictional conference, which was back in July. All right, you with me still? A collection of jurisdictional conferences is called General Conference. That's the governing body of the entire United Methodist Church. Why don't you show a picture of that? This is a map of the General Conference. I show that to you sort of tongue in cheek. But true, if you think about it, the United Methodist Church is only one of 2 actual, globally governed churches. It's only 2. The United Methodist Church and what? Catholic Church. And Pope, that makes a lot of sense. So we're only one of 2 global churches. Our General Conference literally is the entire. You know where the fastest, where United Methodism is growing the fastest in the nation? Africa. And these 2, you're going to hear from them in just a little bit, are going to go on mission in Africa, in the Congo. Because United Methodism is on fire in Africa. So that's our General Conference. And the General Conference, like jurisdictional conference, meets only every 4 years. Because it's a huge body. There are almost 8 million United Methodist Christians across the world. But of course, the conference isn't 8 million people large. The Book of Discipline, that we'll talk about in just a second, limits it every 4 years. So this past year, I can't remember what General Conference was actually, but just a few months in May, it was laity, half clergy. And these 750 people decide what we believe. Because what we believe, sisters and brothers, it's right here. We call this the book of discipline, the book of law. Everything we believe is literally written down right here in the book of discipline. And every 4 years, now the General Conference does a large number of different things. It's a 2-week conference, 10 days. It costs literally millions of dollars. Every 4 years, the jurisdictional conference, now this is a little bit hyperbolic, but every 4 years, the General Conference will go through this book line by line, comma by comma. I've heard a 2-hour argument on the floor of the General Conference on a comma. Line by line, comma by comma, period by period. Some things are really big and really life-changing as far as the polity of the church is concerned, and some are just commas. Not that big of a deal. Every 4 years. This is a dynamic book. It's not static. Every 4 years, the General Conference comes together and says, what do we believe? Do we still believe this? Where's the Holy Spirit leading us? You want to know what the church believes about technology? Right here. You want to know what the church believes about the rights of religious minorities? It's right here. Pensions and health benefits for clergy? It's right here. Everything that governs us is right here. This is, by the way, folks, this has been going on a long, long time. Here's a book of discipline. So this is the most recent one. It's dated 2012. The 2016 General Conference just met, and the new one is being printed right now. It'll be ready before the end of the year. But here's one from 1968. Think about where the nation was with civil rights in 1968. Read this book. Fascinating stuff. Also some boring stuff, but fascinating stuff. Here's my oldest book of discipline that I own. 1930. Think about the world in 1930. Still recovering from World War II, heading into one of the worst economic depressions in history, and read what the United Methodist Church has to say about it. It's fascinating stuff. Some boring stuff too. Fascinating stuff. Sisters and brothers, that's who we are. I will freely admit to you, this is probably not the most riveting sermon you've ever heard, but it is important. Because that's who you are. When we said, will you be loyal to Grace United Methodist Church with your what? Prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness. When you promise to be loyal to the church, this is what you sign on. You just didn't know. So this is your membership class, okay? This stuff is important because sisters and brothers, for better or for worse, that's United Methodist Church. The hymnal is also done, yes, at General Conference, but it's not surprising. She's asking about the hymnal. Not surprising that the hymnal is done by a committee. There's a hymnal committee. In fact, it's a great question. The hymnal committee is meeting right now, and yes, they'll decide what songs go in here, what songs don't go in. Now, it is musicians. It's not just your average folks. I wouldn't have any idea what to put. They're meeting right now, and they're going to create a more. This is a pretty static book, actually. This has been the same since, I think, 1989. But now, with technology, they're saying, maybe we ought to create an e-hymnal. What are some important hymns? What are some not so? Great question. Sisters and brothers, United Methodism is full of committees. But it's not because we've gotten way down in the minutiae. It's because we find our foundation in the Bible. That's who we are. I want to invite you to ask me questions, not right now. But if you have questions about anything I said or didn't say, how the church arrived at this belief or that, email me and just come to me. I'll be glad to speak. Amen. As a response to all we've heard and said to each other and to God, we now have